welcome back to this module on email writing. In the previous module, we discussed that how is it that before hitting the send button, we have to make sure that everything in the email is perfect. Yeah, when we're talking about the language questions, there are a few basic questions that we need to ask ourselves. The first one amongst this is that, is the message easy to read and understand? It might be easy for me to understand because I've used a high-end vocabulary and I'm pro to it. But at the receiver's end, when I'm understanding and reading the message, it might be ambiguous, it might be vague, it might not be understandable. So here, I have to make sure that the language that I'm using is absolutely simple. I have not used bulky paragraphs to explain stuff, but I have made sure that the key pointers are mentioned in a chronological order. And ultimately, my message is understood. The second question is, have I used correct grammar and pronunciation or punctuation? Here, when I'm talking about punctuations and grammar, these are the basic parts of language skills. When I'm talking about language skills, maybe I use incorrect subject-verb agreement. For instance, I were at the stations. The sentence is incorrect. I would be waiting for at the station. Words are missing here. Also, my sentence structure is incorrect. Thus, it becomes all the more important to proofread the entire content before we move ahead. The third question asks, have I divided my thoughts into discrete paragraphs? Again, bulky information in one paragraph is a big no-no. Why? Because when I divide my thoughts into discrete paragraphs, that is where I understand that all this information is going to be presented in a chronological sequence. It's going to make more sense to the reader as well. Are important items such as due dates highlighted in the text? Usually when I'm talking about due dates, due time, even meeting spots, they should be written in bullet pointers as they need to be highlighted. They should not be overpowered by the text that is written there. The next question says, is the capitalization of letters right? Usually it's been observed that people often forget to begin with a capital letter after a full stop, or they tend to have unnecessary capitalizations. Like, for instance, imagine reading the C in the sentence and the T in the sentence and L in the sentence in capital. Makes no sense, right? But to people, it does. So what happens is they use unnecessary capitalization just to highlight a given stuff, which is not correct. If you wish to highlight something, you simply mark it into double inverted commas. The last question says, why have I used all capital letters if I have? This brings us back to the same stuff, wherein we're talking about highlighting a given stuff. I wish to highlight the time. I would write time as capital T, capital I, capital M, capital E. I wish to highlight the venue. I'd write the complete spelling for venue in block letters. I wish to highlight where the meeting is supposed to take place. I would mention the venue absolutely in block letters. But if this is used in the middle of the paragraph, this makes no sense. This makes sense when it's used in discrete bullet pointers. Next, we're going to learn about the elements of an email. When we're talking about these elements are helpful when it comes to email composition. Talking about the subject line, the greetings, the email body, and finally the closing off or the signing off. The subject line is the most important. Why? The reason is that the subject line defines what my email is all about. And the subject line also brings to light whether the email is supposed to be read or not. Its importance is highlighted here. The greetings are my initial introduction to the reader. Through these greetings, the person gets to know what kind of an email it is that I am writing here. While I'm talking about all these things, next comes my email body. The email body is ideally telling me that here, what is the message that I wish to convey? All my WH questions are being answered. What, why, when, where, and how. And the final is the closure. When I'm talking about the closure here, I have to focus on the greetings again? How is it that I'm ending through those greetings? And how is it that I am marking the difference? Coming to the subject line first. When we are talking about the subject line, before sending the, in entire email, we have to make sure that the last moment things should be checked. My subject line should be accurately describing the content. It should be giving my reader a concrete reason to open my message. And if the subject line is a vague description, or in case a person leaves the subject line blank, that is where he or she is missing an opportunity to inform or to persuade the reader. How many times when we receive a mail with a blank subject line, we delete it, thinking that it's unnecessary? Similarly, when we are talking about a blank subject line or an ambiguous subject line, that is where it becomes all the more important that I need to give a call, because the email will not be doing its task perfectly. A blank subject line suggests that your name is in the form, and the recipient should need an order to make a message your top priority. The message would not be reflected on the top if in case the subject line goes blank. There are also people who write subject lines like important, read immediately. This is not giving any proper message to the reader. Rather than the brashly announcements being made that the content that you have shared over your mail is a mystery, make it proper, make it understandable. When we are talking about simple subject lines, there are also subject lines like quick questions. But what kind of a question is it? Why should I be answering these questions? These questions belong to which organization? Again, it becomes ambiguous. That file you had requested for, which file are you talking about? When was it required? Why was it required? All major question marks in my head. Follow up about Friday. Which Friday? No specific date has been mentioned. Which meet are you talking about? It is absolutely vague and ambiguous. Thus, when we are talking about the subject lines, they should be proper and precise. For example, taking the same example ahead, if I talk about the meeting example, if I say 10 confirmed for Friday, we will need a larger room. We are sure that we are talking about 10 in the morning on Friday, and we are sure that we are talking about a conference or a meeting because here it's mentioned that we'd be needing a larger room. We cannot sit in the same room which is allotted to us. So here when we are talking about all these things, we need to make sure that the subject line is descriptive enough so that my reader gets to know what is it that I'm trying to convey. Now comes the most important question. Why is it that the subject line is so important? A subject line is important for multiple reasons. Like, a lot many of us, just by reading the subject line, make sure that whether we have to open that email and read it or we have to delete it. A lot many a times when the subject line is catchy, that is where the recipient tends to open the email. Whereas when it is ambiguous, when it is not worth it, that is where the delete button is hit. The subject line also conveys the gist of the message. In a single statement, you'd be able to understand what the body of the message will be talking about. It sets the tone of the message and encourages the recipient to read the entire email. When we are talking about reading of the email, that has to be a top priority when it comes to the recipient. It can save your message from going into spam category. Usually, a lot of mails that we don't even check move to our spam box, and it keeps on filling one after the other just because it doesn't have the appropriate subject line. How to create effective subject lines. When we are talking about the effectiveness of subject lines, let's understand that what are the key pointers to be kept in mind. One, personalize your email with subject lines. Do not mention ambiguous stuff, mention proper date, time, etc. if that is required. Ensure that the subject line is brief. It's not a complete message that you're sharing in the subject line. Maximum word limit here would range between 6 to 10 words. Create a sense of urgency, not an SOS situation wherein something not done will lead to a disaster, but then create a sense of urgency wherein you're trying to tell the reader that this message is urgent and needs an urgent reply. Ask an important question. Now, this comes to be the major tradition today. When there are questions being asked, questions like, are you too interested in teaching online? Or are you too interested in writing an effective email? People tend to open such emails because it generates a kind of curiosity in them to search out for the answer to that question. Use an emoticon. So when we are talking about effective emails, usually in the formal setup, emoticons are not at all allowed. But when it comes to the semi-formal and informal setups, emoticons can be used. They display a lot more than the words. As rightly said, that an image or a picture is worth 1,000 words. Get rid of spammy language. Ambiguous, unworthy language should be avoided to the most. You have to make sure that you're personalizing the subject line. When we are talking about the subject line here, you should make sure that it is more personalized in nature. Why? Because it provides a better chance for your email to be read and opened. It provides a unique and specific approach to your email, wherein we are talking about multiple things. Supposingly, I need to write an email wherein I need to confirm the date and time for the meeting. The meeting must be having a subject line. The email, that is, I need to mention the name of the meeting. Let's say it is my trainers meet and at what time? 10 p.m. with the date. So even if I am writing this as a specific tagline for a formal setup, that's enough. Whereas if I'm writing a more personalized email, my demographics would be dealing and providing more information or offers based on my customers' past purchases. Wish to purchase a rocking chair again? Wish to buy something for your sofa set? And so on and so forth. Because as a consumer, we know what we have purchased. But even as a seller, you know what the consumer has purchased. You have all the more reasons to be personalized here. It also shows your knowledge about the recipient and the subject you are writing about. A short subject line goes a long way. So when we are talking about subject lines to be short and crisp, they also have to be informative in nature. Why? Because when we are talking about information sharing, today writing and content writing has come a far way. So here you have to make sure that you're smart enough to mold your words into being informative along with being creative. Most people use smartphones to open emails today. We know we have these pocket devices, we have our tablets that are there with us on the go. We need to make sure that we're avoiding the risk of getting cut off on the mobile inboxes. People block, mailers who send multiple mails in one go. It is more likely to grab readers' attention with a short subject line rather than a long one. Let's say, if I'm talking about the introduction in specific, are you too affected by the mosquitoes in your area? And it doesn't end there. Are they troubling you too? It is the right time to use our product. Too big of a subject line. Cut it short, keep it rather simple rather than a long one. It is more likely to grab the reader's attention with a short subject line rather than a long one. It reduces the risk of coming across as one who blabbers. Usually, people do not wish to, spend more time with people who keep, speaking. That's the reason people tend to avoid them. So, in order to, not move to this sphere of avoidance, it's better to keep them short. We have to make sure that we're creating a sense of urgency in the mind of the readers. So we have to highlight the scarcity. Last 2 days or maybe last 2 hours for the Pink Friday sale. Or we're talking about last few hours for the great Amazon sale. So here when we're talking about scarcity, people tend to open the email as quick as possible. And here we have to make sure that we can use a lot of these phrases when it comes to fostering the sense of scarcity. While supplies last, only 2 pieces left in stock. Limited product releases. So if you don't expect you will get an item back in stock if you sell it out. Items in my cart may sell out as soon as possible. Your cart is waiting for you. So here are things that create a kind of a sense of urgency in the minds of the recipients or in the minds of the customers, and they tend to come back to their carts, they tend to come back to your website. When we are highlighting these scarcities, we have to make sure that we are talking about these specifics, wherein the numbers play an important role. We have to put an expiration date in the subject line. Offer ends on so-and-so date at so-and-so time. So this is specifically important when we are talking about sales emails, especially including an expiry date along with discounts that they are offering, which are great or which are heavy discounts. So it creates a kind of urgency again in the mind of the recipient. Offer ends in 48 hours. Offer expires in 1 week. Or you have only 2 days to redeem this offer, post which the product is going to move back to its original price. Use a countdown timer. These days, these GIFs, etc., are playing a very, very, very important role. This is how a countdown timer may help you. It is a visual counterpart to including an expiration date to your subject line. Essentially, there are 2 ways you can display a countdown clock in your email. One is using the HTML code one, which is more related to your softwares, and the second one is a GIF file. Send a sequence of emails. Not that they have to be sent one after the other, after the other, after the other. It will not create a kind of emergency or urgency. It'll actually annoy the reader. So you have to make sure what is the duration in which you're sending these sequence of emails. So a series of emails in the time leading up to the actual day builds up the urgency. Like if I've shared one in the morning, one can be shared in the afternoon and one in the evening, so that the person gets to know last few hours left, last 48 hours, last 30 hours, and so on and so forth. It is an add-on to the countdown timer. Fix a limit, that is a number of emails that you do not want to bombard your recipients with. Again, if it leads to bombarding, it is going to lead to your mail going into the bin only. Change the subject line each time you're giving it a fresh look, a fresh feel. Otherwise, the recipient is going to again throw it back into this bin. Leverage holidays. It's very important that you leverage important holidays. This is like Christmas, Diwali, Holi, etc. Depending on the area you're dealing with, the exact number has to be taken care of in terms of holidays. This is the get this product in time for Diwali, for Christmas, etc. approach. Works well before the holidays because people tend to buy gifts before that. Depending on the products you sell, you can also use this approach during change of season, like autumn to winters, to summers, to rainy, etc. Depending on the products you sell, when we are talking about these products, they're also at times limited by time. So you have to make sure you're selling it well in time. For example, if you sell swimsuits, consider sending an email that says, "Summer is coming. Get your swimsuit in time for the first beach day." In this respect, you're not creating a sense of urgency so much as you are leveraging an existing one. People know that this is what is approaching, and they know that this is what is coming up their way. With this, let's put a pause here to this session. We'll be meeting back soon. Thank you so much.